New Guinea campaign of the Pacific War lasted from January 1942 until the end of the war in August 1945. During the initial phase in early 1942, the Empire of Japan invaded the Australian administered territories of the New Guinea Mandate and Papua and overran western New Guinea, which was a part of the Netherlands East Indies. During the second phase, lasting from late 1942 until the Japanese surrender, the Allies, consisting primarily of Australian and U.S. forces, cleared the Japanese first from Papua, then the Mandate, and finally from the Dutch colony. The campaign resulted in a crushing defeat and very heavy losses for Japan. As in most Pacific War campaigns, disease and starvation claimed more Japanese lives than enemy action. Most Japanese troops never even came into contact with Allied forces, and were instead simply cut off and subjected to an extremely effective blockade by the U.S. Navy. Garrisons were effectively besieged and denied shipments of food and medical supplies, and as a result, some claim that 97% of Japanese deaths in this campaign were from non-combat causes. The struggle for New Guinea began with the capture by the Japanese of the city of Rabaul at the northeastern tip of New Britain Island in January 1942. The Allies responded with multiple bombing raids. Rabaul overlooks Simpson Harbor, a considerable natural anchorage, and was ideal for the construction of airfields. Over the next year, the Japanese built up the area into the major air and naval base. The Japanese 8th Area Army, under General Hitoshi Imamura at Rabaul, was responsible for both the New Guinea and Solomon Islands campaigns. The Japanese 18th Army, under Lieutenant General Hatosu Adachi, was responsible for Japanese operations on mainland New Guinea. The colonial capital of Port Moresby, on the south coast of Papua, was a strategic key for the Japanese in this area of operations. Capturing it would both neutralize the Allies' principal forward base and serve as a springboard for the invasion of Australia. For the same reasons, General Douglas MacArthur, Supreme Commander Allied Forces Southwest Pacific Area, was determined to hold it. MacArthur was further determined to conquer all of New Guinea in his progress towards the eventual recapture of the Philippines. He placed all Australian and U.S. Army, Air Force, and Navy forces in the Port Moresby area. After securing the Huon Gulf and Peninsula, the Japanese turned to Port Moresby. Operation Mo was the name given by the Japanese for their initial plan to take possession of the port. Their operation plan decreed a 5-pronged attack. One task force to establish a seaplane base at Tulagi in the Lower Solomons, one to establish a seaplane base in the Leeweside Archipelago off to the eastern tip of New Guinea, one of transports to land troops near Port Moresby, one with a light carrier to cover the landing, and one with 2 fleet carriers to sink the Allied forces sent in response. In the resulting 4th through the 8th of May, 1942, Battle of the Coral Sea, the Allies suffered higher losses in ships but achieved a crucial strategic victory by turning the Japanese landing force back, thereby removing the threat to Port Moresby, at least for the time being.
2 American veterans from the Battle of the Coral Sea are in Townsville for the 70th anniversary. The naval encounter with the Japanese is seen as a turning point in the Pacific War, one where a special bond was forged between Australia and the United States.
"70 years ago, it was some very young Americans coming to the rescue. Harry Fry and Cecil Wiswell were both teenagers when they served on the USS Lexington.
I was actually a seaman first class. I was 19 years old, and my dad, invincible.
One of the guys come into the shower and he says, "There's a Japanese plane trying to land on our ship." And I run out in the catwalk, all soaked down to see the action.
But the reality of war soon hit home. Their ship and hundreds of its crew were lost during the battle. It was the Allies' first major air and naval offensive in the Pacific, which ultimately stopped the Japanese from capturing Port Moresby.
The reality was that Australia needed a great and powerful friend. Lucky for us, also at that moment, a great and powerful friend, the United States, needed us.
The enduring partnership forged through battle, honoured in a message from the United States President Barack Obama.
As we honour their memory, we reaffirm our commitment to move forward together to shape a world that is secure, prosperous, and free.
It gets to your heart, you know, when they play your anthem and my anthem, it brings tears to my eyes.
Simultaneous operations from Milne Bay and Buna, one amphibious and one overland, would converge on the Port Moresby. Buna was easily taken as the Allies had no military presence there. On September 17th, the Japanese had reached the village of Ioribawa, just 20 miles from the Allied airdrome at Port Moresby. The Australians held firm and began their counterdrive on September 26th. While it was beyond MacArthur's capabilities to deny Buna to the Japanese, the same could not be said of Milne Bay, which was easily accessible by Allied naval forces. In early June, U.S. Army engineers, Australian infantry, and an anti-aircraft battery were landed near the Lever Brothers coconut plantation at Gilly Gilly, and work was begun on an airfield. The Japanese arrived, and from August to September, the Battle of Milne Bay was underway. The Japanese drive to conquer all of New Guinea had been decisively stopped. MacArthur was now determined to liberate the island as a stepping stone to the reconquest of the Philippines. MacArthur's rollback began with the Battle of Bunagana, which took place November of 1942 to January of 1943. The experience of the Green U.S. 32nd Infantry Division, just out of training camp and utterly unschooled in jungle warfare, was nearly disastrous. Instances were noted of officers completely out of their depth, of men eating meals when they should have been on the firing line, even of cowardice. MacArthur relieved the division commander and on November 30th instructed Lieutenant General Robert L. Edgeburg, commander of the U.S. Corps, to go to the front personally with the charge to remove all officers who wouldn't fight. If necessary, put sergeants in charge of battalions. I want you to take Buna or not come back alive. Wau is a village in the interior of the Papuan Peninsula, approximately 30 miles southwest of Samalamau. An airfield had been built there during an area gold rush in the 20s and 30s. This airfield was of great value to the Australians during the fight for northeast Papua. Taking the airfield at Wau was a crucial step for the Japanese in securing Port Moresby. The Australians prevailed, however, against the attack. Within a few days, the enemy was retreating from the Wau Valley. About 1 week later, the Japanese completed their evacuation of Guadalcanal. Fleet Admiral Yamamoto vowed that he would pay back the Allies for the disaster at the Bismarck Sea, with a series of massive airstrikes called Operation Igo. For this, he ordered the air arm of Vice Admiral Arizawa's 3rd Fleet carriers to reinforce the 11th Air Fleet at Rabaul. At 177 planes, this was the largest Japanese air attack since Pearl Harbor. Igo demonstrated that the Japanese command was not learning the lessons of air power that the Allies were. Actual Allied losses amounted to 1 destroyer, 1 oiler, 1 corvette, 2 cargo ships, and approximately 25 aircraft. These meager results couldn't get the Japanese what they hoped to gain from the operation. Spanning for many additional battles until 1945, with the WWII campaign being one of the final campaigns of the Pacific theater of World War II, the Allies emerged victorious in New Guinea.